Japan Up Close.
Working together to strengthen multilateralism should be one area, and then dealing with the systemic competition with the party state, with China, in a productive kind of manner. That means, on the one hand, seeking cooperation with China on global public goods challenges, on climate crisis, on pandemics. I think we can work together and reach out to China. On the other hand, it means standing up for our interests when they're threatened through authoritarian state capitalism. That means addressing unfair trade practices at the WTO, working together to strengthen cooperation on technology. 5G is one issue area. I think that can be an important focus of Japan-Europe cooperation.
Well, I would say, broadly speaking, it is about really the defense of multilateralism. And the defense of multilateralism, which is not to be interpreted in purely defensive terms. So it's not just about the conservation of an existing system, but the appreciation that the current system, if it wants to continue to be governed by norms of multilateralism, what I mean by norms of multilateralism is really the idea of a degree of common values, a degree of shared and diffuse reciprocity, and basically an understanding that there are basic rules of the game to follow, including in areas in which we are naturally bound to compete. So it is about preserving the rules that exist, but it's also about accepting that certain rules will have to be rediscussed because the power configuration underpinning the international system is different. So that, I think, is the broad context within which our cooperation should develop. Now, more specifically, I think that the areas that we should be working on basically revolve probably around three or four domains. I think it's fundamentally important to develop the work that we have already embarked upon concerning our economic relationship and add basically further flesh onto those bones in order not just to govern the bilateral relationship between the EU and Japan, but also to work together so as to increase the possibilities of these standards becoming global standards too. A second key area is probably that of climate change, an area which is obviously going to be, it's probably one of, if not the defining question of our age, and I think this is also something that we have to work very closely on. Thirdly, I would say what we really need to work very closely on is the investment in the multilateral system. Beginning with the UN system and its agencies, because it's very clear that if we don't do it, well, we know who is going to do it, and that is China. And we do have, I think, a shared interest in ensuring that the norms underpinning the UN system continue to be shared norms by all of us. And then fourth and finally, obviously, is the area of security and defense. Now here there is an element of what is it that we can do together, as well as an element of which are the notes, if you like, that we're sharing. Given that, as I said, in terms of the strategic predicament that we're in, we are in a very similar situation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is maritime security and freedom of navigation in the high seas. It's a very important, even critical issue for Japan. But it's also a very important question for European countries which have a strong maritime tradition and a global presence. And I'm thinking of France, of course, but also the United Kingdom. Of course, the UK is no longer in the EU, but it will remain a European power. So it's good to think about Japan-EU, but there's also a Japan-Europe broader dimension. So for those reasons, I think that it's important the Europeans, the French in particular, and as many European countries as possible remain present and active in the maritime domain. I'm thinking about the South China Sea in particular. It does not necessarily mean doing the same kind of operations that the US Navy is doing, but doing our own operation. showing the flag to show that we care about this global common good, which is freedom of navigation. So freedom of navigation, maritime security, but there are also natural areas of cooperation, such as cybersecurity, climate change, and maybe also all that leads us to not allow the global geopolitical and geoeconomic system to be entirely dominated by the United States and China.
Japan up close.